Everyone, welcome to another Overrated Film Saturday, and today I'm going to be looking into another recent film that came out. I believe at least for quite some time it's been out, but it's not necessarily that old. And that film, as you probably see by the title and thumbnail, is Moneyball. Now, again, like a lot of the films, pretty much the majority of the films that I talk about in this overrated category are not necessarily horrible films. In fact, the majority of them I actually find somewhat enjoyable to watch. And Moneyball within and of itself is, I guess you could say, somewhat enjoyable, but I think there are a lot of issues with it, and I think it doesn't really hold up as far as even a baseball film is concerned. So let me kind of go into explaining why that is and why I think that is. So the thing about Moneyball is that it treats, in particular, the sport that is talking about, baseball, in a very business-oriented kind of environment. In other words, you don't really see so much people playing or the players or the interaction between the coach and the different members of the team, or really any of the staff really interacting. It's very, again, it has this sort of cut and dry approach to it. In other words, sort of business as usual. Like you'll see even within the film how there's certain players that are traded off, and it's kind of treated as like, yeah, you're done, you're moving on to another team now, and so you don't really get any kind of real emotional investment with any of the characters and whatnot, and you sort of think that a lot of it does feel very hollow, and you don't really you can't really get behind any of the character relationships, I think. And that's why I think this film sort of didn't propel any sort of level of inspiration that it could have generated from a story like this, which is supposedly from my research, this was supposed to be sort of based off of real events. And also another thing that I think deters this film from being any way, shape, or form as significantly influential as some other sports films is the fact that the acting isn't all that impressive. I mean, obviously they're doing good performances. I mean, it's not like Brad Pitt or Jonah Hill are bad at what they do. It's just, it kind of just feels a little phoned into me. It doesn't really feel like that there's really any genuineness behind again, the characters and their sort of interactions with each other. Again, it feels very kind of very business oriented, very kind of dull, not as it doesn't feel very human. And the thing is a lot of sports, in particular, if you want to make sports stories interesting, you really build upon the relationships between the characters, and you get some kind of emotional attachment from the fact that what brings them all together is, in particular, the sport that they play. And again, none of that is present in Moneyball really at all. So at the end of the day, it really leaves you kind of unsatisfied. I mean, at least for me, I didn't feel as satisfied watching it. I just thought it was all right. Like, I just came with the feeling like, it's not really anything all that special, unfortunately. And again, I think that's a lot of the ways in which they sort of, again, handled the whole approach of the environment and sort of the atmosphere that they gave off, as well as the character interactions and whatnot. Again, I think all of that just put a damper on the very humanesque elements that could have, and I think should have, been there. And also, we sort of get into Brad Pitt's character's sort of personal life, and you sort of think it's just kind of, it's not as uplifting or inspiring. It's kind of sad. He's not really around his little girl that much, and it's kind of just it's just sort of there just to give some somewhat human context to things. But again, there's not enough of that, and you don't really get a connection really with Brad Pitt and his daughter, because again, they're barely together all that much either. So again, it feels very lackluster, the whole thing, and not something of real, genuine substance. And but basically, if in case you're not sure exactly what in particular this true story they're supposedly following is about, it's basically about Billy Bean, who is played by Brad Pitt, and he's basically the general manager of the Oakland A's. And basically, the whole entire point of the plot is to sort of get the Oakland A's to be this sort of all-star team and have them sort of get into the World Series. And you'll sort of see whether or not there is a level of success or failure in that endeavor. Now, and the way in which they do that is actually really unique, and that's why I think they really thought, Hollywood at least, really thought that they could make a story out of this, because again, the way they form this team is actually rather interesting. But again, it's the fact that these characters don't give off anything inspiring, the fact that they treat everything as sort of, a business transaction, there's no human emotion, there's no inspiration, there's no uplifting moments, there's no way in which these characters really interact with one another that makes you think that there's sort of really a genuineness to all of the relationship, or at least to the relationships. And again, I don't know if maybe that was the film's intention. It might have been the intention of the filmmakers to make a sports film that was devoid of all of the inspiration and all of the heart and humility of it, and just show the raw, kind of dull sort of business that at least, in particular, even baseball and a lot of other sports have unfortunately probably have become nowadays, because they do treat everything as sort of like, yeah, okay, this guy's gonna now leave us, he's not part of our team anymore, okay, we're gonna get this guy now, and just very, there's just nothing very genuinely, there's just nothing you can really connect with. And again, that might have been the film's intention, and and the misfortunes that kind of happen within the film could have solidified, I think, that angle. But again, I think that just doesn't lead to anything, productive when talking about this kind of stuff. I mean, they could have added in some elements to where you could get invested and really enjoy the characters and enjoy the whole story. But since the whole dynamics are kind of just phoned in and not really all there too much, you don't really feel a genuineness to the whole story, and you felt like it was just a transaction. This was sort of like, yeah, business as usual. Okay, I'm gonna make this team, and we're gonna win games and do whatever, and again, just nothing personal, nothing human to it all that much. But that's just my honest thoughts on it. I mean, it's definitely, I don't think, a horrible film by any stretch of the imagination. And again, I sort of think it is better than The Blind Side, which I did talk about relatively recently, only because it treats its material with a certain level of seriousness, and again, it doesn't try to play into identity politics and things like that. It just kind of more so tries to be sort of more straightforward, and I can sort of appreciate it more for doing that than trying to make everything feel very fake. I'm glad that it kind of strips down and makes things kind of more raw, but I think there was a way of doing it to where it could have been a lot more engaging and entertaining. It can have a certain level of fluff to it, and it can be fun, and I think that's what's lacking. And I think a lot of sports films, it's usually sports films, they try to be really cheesy, really hammy, they really try to be overly inspirational. and then sometimes they're just too gritty, they're just too hard, they're just too dark. And I think Moneyball went more for that angle, and I don't think it really gave off anything really emotionally heartfelt and interesting at the end of the day. Um, and but again, there's obviously other films out there, in particular sports films, that do balance the two out very well. For example, Rocky, perfect example of one that really balances out the raw hard work behind the sport, but also shows you the heart and the uh, emotional attachments that the characters have with one another. But again, here with Moneyball, you just get everything pretty much stripped down, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, you're left with nothing, unfortunately, memorable. But that's just my honest thoughts, though. I'd be more than happy to hear what anybody else has to say. And if there are any questions, comments, concerns, be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care.